He-Man's me, Kevin Smith, Silent Bob, and all those terrible Jay and Silent Bob type pictures, man. You're listening to Drop the Mic, the only podcast that I listen to that I'm not a part of. Every podcast I listen to, I usually talk on it, but not fucking Drop the Mic. That's where I'm like, let me hear what the boys have to say. And now, we drop the mic.
It began with a sound that no one was ever supposed to hear.
He's the one who saw it?
Yes, he says he pulled the girl out of the car.
I would like you to forget about her.
Yeah, that's what I heard just before the tire blew out. You're right, it was a shot.
He recorded a murder. They say it never happened.
There's still loose ends, witnesses. The girl, I've decided to terminate her. Terminate her. Terminate her.
Brian De Palma's Blowout. Now you hear it. Now you don't.
Welcome back to our humble San Diego podcast. We are your hosts, Wesley Swanson and Chris Pawlak, and you've tuned into episode 297, The Sound of Murder, in which we will be discussing director Brian De Palma's 1981 effort, Blowout. But before we dive deeper into this conspiracy-thriving film, let's get everybody warmed up with some of our usual intro segments, shall we? What's up, Chris? How are you? Welcome back, man.
Thanks for having me, dude. Happy Thanksgiving, post-Thanksgiving. I guess we're doing this day after.
That's right.
So I hope you had a good holiday. I hope all your listeners had a good holiday.
You as well, man. Thank you, as always, for coming on for your end of the month takeover. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk about this because, like I said, this is one of the rare times where you haven't seen the movie.
I know. Such a fun experience, to be honest.
But it's pretty great, like catching something for the first time and like with fresh eyes, isn't it?
Yes, especially something that's vintage, because that's my jam. I love going back in time and just rediscovering, or not rediscovering, but discovering stuff that I didn't know existed, or I just hadn't gotten around to actually seeing in its entirety yet. And this is one of them. So, first and foremost, thank you for putting this on the docket and giving me some motivation to check it out, because it was such a fun time.
Awesome, dude. Awesome. Can't wait to get into it.
And now for a special news report. Brought to you by Drop the Mic.
All right. With that being said, man, do you have anything on the news front for us this week?
I do. I think they're newish stories, so you probably haven't covered them in the last week or two.
All right.
The first one was Fede Alvarez. I saw was hired by 20th Century Fox, and I don't give a shit if it's 20th Century Studios now, because fuck Disney and the merger. It's always going to be 20th Century Fox. He was hired by them to write and direct a standalone Alien movie.
Oh.
And, of course, that's going to premiere on Hulu, because I guess Disney won't let 20th Century Fox movies in the theater for some reason. I don't know why they keep pushing shit to Hulu.
Just like Prey, right?
Yeah, like Prey. Like, why wasn't that released in the theaters? That would have been awesome to see in the theater. But anyways, they want him to do an Alien movie. Ridley Scott's going to produce it. And I guess they're in talks with Kaylee Spaney, who was in Bad Times at the El Royale. She was Dakota Johnson's sister, the one in the cult.
Yes.
And Debs. Have you checked out Debs? It's like a miniseries that was on Hulu a couple years ago.
I don't think so.
Check it out. It's awesome. It was from Alec Garland.
I think that's something you've wrecked on the show here before, correct?
Probably, because I'm a big fan of that guy's work, and I really enjoyed that miniseries. It was really cool. So that's one news story. Look for an Alien movie, possibly. Hopefully better than Alien Covenant, which is garbage.
Is there any talks about what it's going to try to establish in that universe?
No.
Okay.
No, I didn't see anything. I just saw the we've hired this guy to do this Alien movie, and this is probably who's going to be our star.
I know,
but that was it.
A lot of people are going to be upset over that because Fede Alvarez produced the newest was Texas Chainsaw film that went to Netflix, and a lot of people didn't like that movie. So,
I saw that a lot in the credits where people were like really talking shit on it, but then other people had to remind them, or in the comments, other people had to remind them that he didn't direct that movie,
No, he did not.
So we'll see. As far as I know, he's only directed the 3 movies, right?
Yeah, and then he's been, doing some light writing and just executive producing. But as far as I know, he's just done the Evil Dead remake, Don't Breathe, and then the Girl in the Spider's Web. Is that what it's called?
Yeah. 2 of those movies were good.
Yeah.
But that's my first story. The second one is the directing duo, I guess they're actually more of a trio, of Radio Silence.
Yes.
Announced plans to remake Escape from New York. To which I say, no, don't do that.
Yes, Ryan brought this up last week, and he said that it's also coming from, James Wan is attached as well. Is that true?
I don't know. I know at one point, like after Upgrade, like Lee Whannell was kind of thinking about maybe remaking it, but they've been talking about remaking the movie for years.
Yes.
When they're like, oh, Gerard Butler is going to be Snake Plissken. And I'm like, that's a fucking awful idea. That guy sucks. But yeah, don't remake Escape from New York, guys. I love Ready or Not, but you don't have to do that.
I wanted to give a shout out to Kevin Conroy, the voice actor who most notably voiced Batman, the animated series, for many years.
Yes.
He passed away recently after a short battle with cancer. So I just wanted to shout him out because he was a definitive voice for a generation. Very important.
Totally agree.
And then in some more bummer, tragic news, I know you've heard, you probably are aware of this, even though you're not a big Power Rangers guy. I know that. But we lost Jason David Frank, who is again most notably known for being Tommy Oliver on the original Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, Green and the White Ranger. Made tons of cameos and been loyal to the franchise for about 30 years or so now.
He cameoed in the movie, right? The movie that was out a few years ago?
Yes.
Oh, Jesus, that might be 5 or 6 years ago now.
The newer one?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm not wrong there.
But yeah, we lost him this week in a pretty devastating kind of out in left field manner. So, it's a shame. Check on your family and friends and make sure they're okay all the time.
Yeah.
And now it's time for the weekly recommendations.
The first one I want to recommend is a miniseries that ran on FX or maybe Hulu. I don't know which, but you can find it on Hulu now. And that's The Old Man with Jeff Bridges and John Lithgow, who we're going to talk about tonight. Jeff Bridges is a ex-CIA operative that gets targeted for a revenge plot. And John Lithgow's like an old CIA acquaintance, even though I wouldn't go so far as to call them friends. But he's kind of the one leading the I don't want to say task force, but he's the guy at the CIA kind of tasked with finding and most likely taking Jeff Bridges out. And it's really great. It's 7 or 8 episodes. I'm about halfway through, but I have really enjoyed it so far. And there's some pretty great, brutal fight scenes. One of which was definitely like one take. I think even the first one is in the first episode is a single take as well, with Jeff Bridges and someone that's trying to kill him. And for an older dude, he really got into it.
That's on, was FX? Hulu?
FX or Hulu, FX, Hulu, whatever. You can find it on Hulu. That's where I'm watching it now because I think it aired in the summer.
Gotcha.
But I just got around to checking it out. But it's called The Old Man with Jeff Bridges and John Lithgow. Check it out. It's really awesome. And the other one I have, I know I've recommended it before a couple years ago, but given that we're talking about De Palma movie tonight, I want to recommend yet again the De Palma documentary. That's, I think, from like 2014 or 2015.
2015.
2015. Directed by Jake Paltrow and Noah Baumbach. Super good, really insightful documentary, and it's literally De Palma sitting in a chair in a room talking about every single one of his films. It's amazing, being such a huge fan of him and his work. Like, it was really awesome just hearing him talk about his movies and like what worked and what didn't, or how he came up with this idea, or how the script was like this before it became this. It's super fascinating. I can't recommend it enough, especially if you're a big fan of his.
Damn, you stole one of my recommendations, but that's all good.
Oh, did you watch it?
Yeah.
I know when I recommended it a couple years ago, you hadn't seen it.
Yeah, I checked it out for this because I wanted to really dive deep into the De Palma stuff. So, I seeked out this documentary. It's from A24 and very, very excellent, informative stuff for sure. I totally agree with you.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Great minds think alike, I guess. So for me, then now I just have the one for Thanksgiving week. They dropped the Netflix original series Wednesday, which is based on the Addams Family. It's from Tim Burton, and it is so much goddamn fun. It's great, man. I haven't had this much fun with a show in quite a while, and dude, Jenna Ortega is just killing it consistently. I can't recommend it enough. Check it out if you haven't already, everybody. Wednesday on Netflix.
Yeah, that's awesome. That was one I was looking forward to checking out.
And now it's time for the weekly recommendations.
All right, dude. So then we're at that point in the show where we're going to talk about your main focus.
Yes.
Which is, as we said at the top of the show, we're talking about Blowout tonight. It's rated R. It's from 1981. It's a thriller. Runs at 1 hour and 48 minutes, and it's got a well-deserved 86 on Rotten.
That's pretty good. I know that this movie, when it came out, got pretty good reviews.
Yes.
But I'm always wondering, how modern audiences would dig it. So that's good. That's good to know that it's got some pretty solid reviews.
You better, man, with the being on Criterion. Shit. All right. Let's get into this. So it's written and directed by Brian De Palma, starring John Travolta as Jack Terry, Nancy Allen as Sally, and John Lithgow as Burke. The story centers around a movie sound engineer, Jack Terry, who accidentally records the audio of a murder while trying to get some authentic ambient nature sounds for a horror film he is currently working on. After saving a young woman from certain death and being told to look the other way because of certain political circumstances, Jack becomes obsessed with what truly happened that evening and is determined to uncover the truth. Director Brian De Palma drew inspiration for Blowout from the 1966 film entitled Blow Up, while obviously changing key elements of the story to make it his own, much like De Palma's earlier works, which were largely inspired by Hitchcock's style of filmmaking. Despite the film being given a large budget once Travolta came aboard the project, Blowout failed to make an impression at the box office, pulling in just $13.8 million against its $18 million budget. However, the film was largely championed by critics and praised for its lead performances. Through the years, the film has gained cult status and was even given the Criterion treatment in 2011. De Palma's film career has had its ups and downs for a variety of reasons, but Blowout stands as one of his best works, with its multi-layered slyness incorporating aspects of filmmaking that were largely overlooked at the time and using them to spin an incredible neo-noir thriller that also speaks on political unrest, corruption, and high-profile assassinations. Let's not forget the incredibly effective and heartbreaking score delivered by Pino Donaggio, which helps elevate the film's conclusion in ways unimaginable. Having just screened the film myself twice this past week for the first time ever, all I can say is please seek this film out, especially if you're a fan of 70s style political thrillers. 4 boom mics out of 5. Stream it now via HBO Max. Thank you.
Good write-up as always.
All right, man. So let's start things off. I have 2 questions for you. I just want to hear your thoughts on De Palma as a whole, and what is your attachment to Blowout specifically?
I think De Palma is a super great director who had his own style. You know, I think I might have mentioned this a couple years ago when I first brought up the documentary. But he always took a lot of shit because a lot of people accused him of being like a Hitchcock ripoff. Obviously, you know, his movie prior to this, which was huge, was Dressed to Kill, which is kind of a twist on Psycho. Another movie that he did mid-70s, I think just prior to Carrie, called Obsession, is kind of a twist on Vertigo.
Mm-hmm.
And this is kind of like, you know, this is another Hitchcock adjacent. I wouldn't call them ripoffs. I would call them Hitchcock adjacent films, except not really pulling anything from Hitchcock, from a Hitchcock movie specifically. Like you said, it's kind of a remix of Blow Up from Michelangelo Antonioni.
Mm-hmm.
Hot take, Blow Up is fucking boring. I watched it because I knew it because of Blowout, and then I watched it on like Turner Classic Movies, and I was fucking bored. Like really bored. So, you know, like I said, that's probably not an opinion shared by a lot of people, but it's definitely my opinion. Watch Blowout instead. It's so much better. But this was you know, I've always been a huge fan of him. I honestly think he's got a hell of a lot more great movies than he has ones that haven't hit. Especially that 70s, 80s, and, you know, early to mid 90s period. He's only got 2 or 3 movies in there that aren't that good. And the rest are pretty amazing as far as I'm concerned. So we can talk some rankings later on, but he was always a director that I admired. I got really into film one summer when I was in high school, and I watched a ton of De Palma movies because I just hadn't seen them, but I knew a lot of them just by reputation.
Mm-hmm.
or, through pop culture. And Blowout was just one of the ones on the list because I always heard that this was a really great movie, probably one of his best, top 3, perhaps. So it was one I definitely sought out when I was getting into like all the De Palma movies. That was I don't know if that explains my attachment to the movie. I think it's one of his best, having gone and watched it. And I saw it pretty early on when I was doing that watch. And it was just one that I always really loved. I think it's a great thriller. I think Travolta probably does his best acting in it prior to Pulp Fiction.
Yes.
And Nancy Allen is great. If you don't know this, I'm sure you do because it probably came up in your research, but she used to be married to De Palma.
That's why he was pretty hesitant about hiring her for this film at the time, right?
Yeah, because she's in 2 of his previous films already. Mm-hmm. She's in Dress to Kill, which she's fantastic in. That's probably her best role, period, let alone the movies she made with De Palma. And she's in Carrie as well. So I think both of them are great. John Lithgow is a great villain. Spoiler for the film. And I was a huge NYPD Blue fan, so I'm like a big Dennis Franz guy.
Mm-hmm.
And Dennis Franz did a lot of work with De Palma, like in the 70s and 80s. So I love seeing Dennis Franz like pop up, and he's really good in this. He's great in Dress to Kill, and he's really good in this. Like really sleazy, like both times. he's like super sleazy in this one because he's like that like low rent like blackmail photographer, and he's great in Dress to Kill as like a cop, but he's also just like real sleazy in that as well. So that's kind of my attachment to this movie, is I was just a big De Palma fan, and I got like way into checking out a lot of his movies that I had never seen before when I was in high school, and this was one that I instantly fell in love with. So now my question to you is the big question I've been waiting to ask you, because as you said, you had never seen this movie. What did you think of it?
Oh man, I loved it. Even just like that, the way the film opens, where it totally throws you for a loop, and it turns out that he's just making fun of basically it's De Palma being meta and telling him like fuck you, I'm not just one style,
Yeah.
where he's totally making fun of like that, like the cheesiness of slasher films, which for a while he was kind of tied to. And then you turn, he flips the script on everybody, and it's a movie within a movie. And right there, mm-hmm. I thought that was incredibly genius. And then the fact that it's the whole story is steeped in like filmmaking, and kind of they use that as the backdrop. I love it because, doing the podcast, I'm an audio guy, so it's instantly relatable there. And then just how everything unfolds and everything that the characters do throughout this, it feels very much like real people. They don't do much things that feel like it's just convenience for the plot. It feels like things that normal individuals would do if they were, set in this scenario. So I really enjoyed it from that aspect. But yeah, seeing obviously I've always liked Nancy Allen, Travolta, and seeing him be so good after coming off of the run of the young guy, like doing the Urban Cowboy, Saturday Night Fever, Grease, like this is so different, and he just kills it.
Mm-hmm.
Everything. And then of course Lithgow, holy shit, So good, especially because I never seen, I'm aware of it, but I've never seen like Raising Cain and all.
You should watch Raising Cain, dude.
Yeah. Like
it's not like a great movie, but Lithgow's so good in it.
Besides, and I wanted to make sure I brought this up, and I know you're not a big Dexter fan, but he comes out as the Trinity Killer, John Lithgow, in season 4, I believe it is, and he's so fucking good, and maniacal, and growing up on him being like just in Third Rock from the Sun, I was unaware that he was this kind of character actor. So to dive back into some of his early work and see how good he is as this villain archetype in Blowout was just it made me so excited, and he's so good, especially in that scene where he's hatched like this plot to do like to kill certain women to make it seem like it's how do you say, like sex killings that are happening in the area.
He in order to make it seem like Nancy, or in order to kill Nancy Allen's character, Sally, he goes through this whole thing of setting up what appears to be a serial killer.
Mm-hmm.
He's killing women that look like her in her area to, cover up her murder, so that, it doesn't get wise that, she was the woman in the car with the presidential hopeful, because she was never supposed to be there.
But that scene where he's dressed up like maybe like a construction worker or something of that sort, but he's obviously tipping off somebody and pretending he's doing like this rendition of what he feels like one of these psychopaths, sexual predators would sound like. But you're seeing him do it, and he's so fucking good because he's playing it straight, but then he's changing his voice, and it's just, I don't know, it's just mesmerizing, man.
And that scene's great because he's outside Travolta's place, watching him come out, but he's like still doing the thing on the phone where he's, oh, I had to do it, she made me do it, and he's like kind of doing like the fake cry
yeah,
and everything, and he's watching Travolta, and then when they ask him, where the body can be found, and he tells them, and then they ask him like, where he is, and he hangs up on them, but he's like still watching Travolta. He switches that persona off, and is back to like being all business as he sees Travolta get in the Jeep and drive off. Yeah, he's great in that, and when he's on the phone with the guy who hired him to do the job, and he's explaining like, what happened and, why he had to take matters not necessarily into his own hands, but he had to alter the plan. It's awesome. He's just so chilling.
His gadgets, like that piano wire.
Oh, the garrote that he has like on his watch is crazy. And you don't see it the first time he kills the first girl, but when he's in the train station, looking to kill the second, he takes it off the watch, and you can kind of see him like playing with it. Yeah, he's good, man. Watch Raising Cain. It's kind of a bonkers movie, but Lithgow is great, and he's got like multiple characters that he plays, and that's another Pino Donaggio score, I think, that he did for De Palma. Where's my notes on that? Donaggio did a handful of De Palma scores. He had scored Carrie. He had scored Dress to Kill, Blowout, obviously.
Do you have off the top of your head the top three De Palma movies?
Oh God, don't make me choose. I've always been a huge fan of Carlito's Way.
Mm-hmm.
I think The Carlito's Way is incredible. I think that's a movie that doesn't get enough love. I think even in the De Palma documentary, he kind of admits that's his best film.
Yeah,
like overall.
That he couldn't. He was all. Yeah, I can't. It doesn't get any better than this.
Yeah. I've always been a huge fan of that one. Bernard Herrmann did the score for Obsession, but unless I spend my time looking through the trivia, it doesn't say anything about Pino Donaggio. So Obsession might be one that he did that was unfinished. I just know that Taxi Driver was like his last like full score.
Which is you got me that as a gift one year.
The score?
The record.
Yeah. That's a great score, that Taxi Driver score. Yeah, check out Obsession if you haven't seen Obsession too. It's pretty good. And Paul Schrader, who, speaking of Taxi Driver, wrote Taxi Driver as well. That same year, I believe, 76.
Mm-hmm.
Wrote the screenplay for Obsession with De Palma. So Carlito's Way, I would be lying if I said that The Untouchables is not in my top 3, just given the sheer amount of times I've seen The Untouchables. And not gonna lie, caught the tail end of it this morning after I got up. And it was on one of the cable channels, so I left it on for like the last half hour. But I love that movie, and that's a movie that I've seen like 100 times since I was in junior high, and would watch it religiously. So I probably would have to throw that in the top 3, and then it's hard between Dress to Kill or Blowout, man. They're both so fucking good, and just like on sheer direction alone. I don't know. I guess I would have to go with Dress to Kill above Blowout. But that's a real hard choice. But man, Dress to Kill, like the direction of that movie alone is incredible. As is, the direction in Blowout. And the most underrated is probably The Fury, if you can watch The Fury, which is great. But I don't know, like, give me yours, dude.
This would probably be a hot take, but I would say Carrie.
Carrie's fantastic. Great movie.
The Untouchables, and now having seen Blowout, I would say probably Blowout's my third.
Probably Blowout. Yeah, that's a good 3, man. Like I said, those 70s and 80s movies, he's not quite on the run like Carpenter is. But he's got a comedy that he makes like in the mid-80s called Tough Guys, which isn't great. And then the adaptation of Bonfire of the Vanities, I think in 1990, is not good. Those are probably the only 2 prior to Snake Eyes that I really don't care for.
Mm-hmm.
But everything he does 70s through the 80s and, through Mission Impossible, beyond those 2 that I singled out, are pretty fucking good. I mean, but you asked me about like how I got into, or what my connection with the movie is. Like, I literally watched Carlito's Way, Dress to Kill, Blowout, Scarface, The Fury, Body Double. I watched those like all the same summer because I'd never seen any of them. I had seen Carrie, and obviously I had seen The Untouchables a fuck ton of times. But I hadn't really seen anything beyond those 2. And that's why that one summer, like 95 or something, I got like way into like movies, and especially like watching all these De Palma movies that I'd always heard of but never seen. So I'm super excited that you like this movie. Because like I said, it's always fun when you haven't seen something, but I always kind of wonder, will you like it or not?
Was did you have a prediction as to where I was going to stand with it?
I was sure that you were going to like it, but you kind of never know. No, because I know that you're a fan of De Palma as well.
Yeah.
And was last year or something, we were watching like the history of horror, and they were talking about Dress to Kill, and I was like, yo, like Dress to Kill, dude, that movie's great. And you're like, dude, yeah, Dress to Kill is amazing. So I figured, well, if you like Dress to Kill, you'll probably like Blowout too. You know, he does Dress to Kill, and then he's kind of like mulling over a few other projects. One of which is Flashdance, which was crazy to think that could have been directed by Brian De Palma. But he has an opportunity to do Flashdance, turns that down. Decides like a script of his own called Personal Effects. Decides to do that. Which, did you catch like where that title comes from?
I don't think so.
It's John Travolta's business. That's the name of his business, is Personal Effects. It's on the door to his office.
I missed it.
I didn't know that either. And then when I was doing the research, I was like, oh yeah, that's the name of his business. I didn't know that was the original title. Or the script for Personal Effects is very close to what Blowout eventually becomes.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned Blow Up, which is about a London fashion photographer who thinks that he unknowingly captures a murder in a photograph. So that's kind of like where De Palma takes that idea and remixes it. But like I said, Blow Up's fucking boring. Watch Blowout instead. And then you talked about the budget, which he had like $9 million, which is a pretty good budget for the early 80s for a movie like this that doesn't seem like a big budget movie. But when you said it was like $18 million, I was like, whoa, like that's fucking crazy expensive for this movie.
Yeah, I guess from the research that I did, they were going to basically produce it on a micro budget, the way that he had done through a lot of his earlier work. But then when they brought Travolta on, because he was a big thing at the time, the studio was like, okay, here's more money. Because I think that the film is just super, super dark, and especially with the ending, how they wrap everything up.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems like that probably had something to do with, people not paying attention as much as they would have, possibly.
Yeah, it's got that downer ending, which we'll get to, but I read that too, that's probably why it didn't do as well. It's because, that word of mouth gets around that, oh man, like this is a good movie, but the ending is like really gut-wrenching. And there is no happy ending, which is a bummer, but still, like, Travolta alone, like, brings in an extra $9 million. That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know he was, I don't know when Urban Cowboy came out. Was that prior to this, or was that just after this?
Let me look that up real quick.
Because I know that Saturday Night Fever is like 77. And then Grease is the following year, is 88. Oh, yeah, Urban Cowboy was before this. Okay.
80, yeah.
Yeah, 80. So that's this movie, yeah. So yeah, I guess you're right, man. I guess he had a hot run and was an in-demand guy. Where did he lose it, dude? Because he was doing, some shitty movies, and then Pulp Fiction obviously resurrected him, but what? Oh, not Physical. Perfect is the name of the movie. Where he's like a reporter that gets into like he's doing a story on like the aerobics craze of the 80s. That comes in the mid 80s. Staying Alive, which is kind of a shitty semi-sequel to Saturday Night Fever.
Mm-hmm.
He does right after Blowout. And then he doesn't do a whole lot for a couple of years. And then he's in like Look Who's Talking, And it's pretty much like everything post Blowout is the downfall.
Until 94.
Until Pulp Fiction.
And then after Pulp Fiction, he has like this another run of like was Phenomenon and Michael and
Get Shorty, one of our shows that is one of my favorite films, which I believe I said is his best post Pulp Fiction work.
Mm-hmm.
He does the 2 John Woo flicks, which he's incredible in both. Civil Action, which is great. General's Daughter, which is very good. And then he does the fucking Scientology movie, and it's all downhill after that.
Followed by Swordfish.
Oh man, Swordfish. There's probably others, but that's a movie where I was really excited for it and then saw it and was like, man, what went wrong? So, well, I mean, he had worked with De Palma before because he's in Carrie. Both him and Nancy Allen are a couple in Carrie.
Mm-hmm.
Both get killed in that car accident when she makes them drive off the road.
They're literally the two that come up, hatch the plot with the pig's blood, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was their plan. They managed to escape the slaughter in the gym, and then run into Carrie as they're driving home, and she forces them off the road with her telekinesis. But he's awesome in that. So, do you know who they wanted for his role at first? Well, I don't know if the studio. It sounds like De Palma. De Palma considered Al Pacino.
That makes sense.
Al Pacino was obviously a big deal at that time too. But he gives it to Travolta, which I think Travolta is much better in this than Pacino would have been.
Mm-hmm.
I think Pacino would have been a little bit harder edged than Travolta, and especially his scenes with Nancy Allen, where he's really concerned for her well-being.
Yeah, their chemistry, like the kind of what's the term? Like there's like this kind of tragic thing where their fate is probably not going to be the greatest one.
Yeah.
But they're so, I feel like their feelings towards each other are so innocent, and that becomes kind of like their downfall, because as much as they know and they think they know, they're really still kind of out of the loop of what's actually happening and the immediate danger that they're in.
Yeah, that's... Travolta kind of knows, and he's trying to convince her, hey, like, they made you disappear, pretty soon it's going to be me. Like, he knows that this is a big deal, but he still is the one to kind of, send her out into the danger, thinking that he can still protect her.
Which is a sad thing, because he's went through this trauma, and that's what he's I feel like he's fighting himself to he's trying to redeem himself because of this past trauma he went through, where he used to set up stings and basically flip the script on corrupt cops. And we get a backstory within the film where he sets up this guy who's trying to infiltrate, who's trying to get the drop on these cops and so they can see them get justice. And the guy ends up being like a super heavy sweater. Mm-hmm. And the rig, the mic that he's taped up with, ends up burning a hole into him because he's sweating too much, and it gets to the battery and the acid starts eating into his skin. So then he has to pull over very suspicious like and asks to use a public restroom. And then Travolta realizes that something's wrong, and ends up finding him hung in the bathroom, and so he has that on his conscience where he's got this guy killed, and that plays into like the story of Blowout, where he is just trying to do the right thing in this situation, but he makes the kind of the wrong mistake or the wrong decision where he uses Sally as bait and pretty much sets her up in the exact same way that he did with that prior story, and things take a turn for the worst.
Yeah. And he's not paying enough attention at the end, like when, the guy, he's waiting for the phone call that never comes. And she's like, oh yeah, well, he called me. And obviously it's not the TV reporter that called. It was Burke that called because Burke had tapped the phone.
Mm-hmm.
But she's like, oh yeah, he called me and said that, he was trying to call you all day. And it's like, it doesn't register with Jack that how would that guy know Sally's information? How would he be able to track down Sally? He knew that there was a girl, but he didn't know anything about her. He didn't know her name or didn't have a phone number, none of that. And Jack should have been smarter and known that something was up. But I think he was more so focused on exposing the conspiracy than really paying attention to things aren't adding up. And that's the mistake that he makes with Sally.
Also, I want to get your thoughts on that when he fucking loses his shit and takes his Jeep and just goes flying through the parade, and he very nearly hurts some people and crashes through a store window, and then I know he's obviously unconscious and everything, and then he wakes up in the back of an ambulance and is pretty, like, he easily just evades everyone and becomes like back on the pursuit of Sally. But how come nobody was more upset about him doing all that?
Immediately when I watched that on the rewatch, I was like, wait, like he was driving like a madman through the middle of the parade and through all these crowds. Like, as soon as he crashed, like, the cops should have been on him. He should have woken up like handcuffed to a gurney in the back of an ambulance or in the hospital or something.
Yeah, especially when he's doing those donuts around those cops for so long, and then he just rips through the fucking... It's just like, this is nuts, dude.
I guess we'll chalk that up to plot convenience, but yeah, I was like, oh, the cops definitely would have been on him. That was, and he crashes, and everyone's like, oh, hey, we need help over here.
And another thing is, and I'm just being nitpicky, but they just continue the parade after that near fatal, like, this guy could have been a domestic terrorist for all of they know. And they just continue to do the parade in Philadelphia. It's fucking nuts, dude.
I take it back. That's where the 18 mil win is, that parade. That's pretty well staged.
Yeah. And they have like the bird's eye view shots and everything. It's crazy.
And you said at the top of the show in your intro, like, the 70s style, like, paranoia thriller.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what a lot of the direction reminds me of. Like you said, the bird's eye view. There's the scene that a lot of those movies do that we've seen in, a few other movies we've talked about on this show, where the camera just kind of like is like really far away,
mm-hmm.
and kind of pans and tilts down until they find, the actor that you're looking for. It pans through the crowd. Or through, it does it in the train station. It does it in the chase scene where it kind of finds the subject. And a lot of those movies do that. Those 70 paranoia thrillers do it. But you mentioned the story about the undercover cop that he wires up that, ends up being murdered because his sweat like causes the tape device to not malfunction, but like burn him. that was taken from a project that De Palma very nearly did. He was going to adapt Prince of the City, which is a book about police corruption.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a deal in place to like produce and direct the film, and they had actually co-written the screenplay for that film. And then eventually that deal falls through, and that project goes to Sidney Lumet, who made, a bunch of great flicks like Dog Day Afternoon, which you and I both loved. It gets recommended a lot. And Serpico Network, which is another amazing film. So it goes to Sidney Lumet, and both of these movies, Blowout and Prince of the City, open up the same summer, like within weeks of each other, and then both are, not bombs, but both underperform at the box office. So I thought that was pretty fascinating. They took a story from another screenplay that was very nearly in production, and writes it into this. And then, speaking of the De Palma documentary, like Scarface was originally supposed to be directed by Lumet, and De Palma took it over. And Scarface stars Al Pacino, who almost starred in Blowout, which was the movie that was made previously before Scarface. So it all comes full circle.
Do you like Scarface still?
Love Scarface, of course.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's super trashy, but it's so fucking good. It's so good. It's a movie that like you can just pop on at any point in the movie and watch.
Yes.
And it's just so fucking over the top, but it's amazing. So he does Blowout instead of Prince of the City. They suggest Olivia Newton-John as the Sally character, because obviously she had just worked with Travolta in Grease a couple years earlier, and they had, big time chemistry. But De Palma immediately shoots that down. I know he was hesitant to use Nancy Allen, because they're married. She's obviously coming off of a huge role in Dress to Kill.
Mm-hmm.
But, he agrees, and Travolta, I think, was one of the ones pushing for it. Because, they had done Carrie together, and they got along really well, and liked each other a lot. So he says, hey, man, put your wife in the movie. Like, we obviously work well together.
What are now that we're talking about Nancy Allen, how did you like how her character was written?
Yeah, she's kind of naive.
Yes.
It's watching it like I didn't watch them back to back, but just had seen Dress to Kill recently. Had rewatched it. Like her characters in both those movies are so opposite of one another, because she's so obviously in control in Dress to Kill, and knows exactly what to do and how to manipulate men. And in this, she's very naive. She has that like weird affect in her voice where it's almost like the baby doll voice.
Yes.
And even when she's caught by, not caught, but when she meets with Burke thinking that he's Donahue, the TV reporter, she's just like talking instead of kind of paying attention to what's going on, and even trying to help Jack, like with where she is, and she's kind of failing at that.
And because she gets on the subway, which is obviously going to render her helpless because the transmitter it's obviously not going to work at that range, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's crazy. It's how it's so different, her character in this than she is in Dress to Kill. But she's great in this. I know that it's different, and we've talked about why that's different and how she acts in the movie. But she's very good in it.
when Jack asks her, he's also, so what were you doing with that the governor and that night? And she's all, that's a really personal question, And then later on you find out she was in cahoots with that sleazy photographer trying to take advantage of him the whole time. So she's not technically innocent either.
No, that's their racket is her and Manny. They set up blackmail stuff. She hops into bed with some guy. She says husbands or politicians or whomever. And Manny snaps some pictures, and then they use it as blackmail, or set up the divorce between, to show them to the wives, and the wives want to divorce their husbands. They get a big payday out of it. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what this was. What this started as was they were going to embarrass him by putting him in the car with this woman, to make it seem like something shady was going on. Manny was going to snap pictures of it, and then the plan got just so fucking out of control. The Burke shoots out the tire, which causes the blowout, which, they end up driving off of a bridge. But even when he's on the phone with his handler or the guy that hired him, Burke's like, oh, hey, it worked. He dropped out of the race, except not in the way that they had planned.
And then his handler's like, I don't know you. I've never seen you before. Don't ever call me again. And he's all, wait. We got some loose ends here.
Yeah.
Completely desensitized to anything.
I told you, man, he's a good villain in this movie.
Yes.
He erases Jack's tapes. All of them. So there's nothing on it. He wants to make him seem like a crazy person. He's after Sally, and in order to catch Sally, or in order to, cover up her murder, he needs to murder 2 or 3 other women. He wasn't even supposed to shoot out the tire, but he changes the plan on the fly.
He even mentions that. He was like, that was my initial plan, to shoot out the tire. And they were like, yeah, but don't you remember we disagreed on... So he's just like this kind of rogue hitman that just does whatever the fuck he wants. Dude, let's talk about when he... because he tells his handler, he was all, I've decided to... to take out Sally and the the sound guy. I'm gonna wipe all his tapes so that he looks like a crackpot. And then they go back to Jack goes back to his studio to try to piece some stuff together. And then there's that great kind of where the camera is just on a tripod and it's just spinning slowly around his studio, and he's just playing he's just whatever tapes he can get his hands on, and he's realizing that everything in his studio has been wiped. My question to you is, and I think that's an expertly executed scene, but how did Burke do that so fast? Did he have some kind of magnetic tool that he, obviously he got back in the studio somehow, but how did he wipe that entire catalog? Obviously pretty fast.
Exactly. He has a magnetic tool, and if you see it at the beginning when he goes into the garage to replace the tire, to make it look like a real blowout instead of like someone shot out the tire.
Yeah. When
he lifts open his trunk, he moves, it's a box that says like magnetic tape eraser.
Oh, okay.
Something like that. He moves that box out of the way to get the spare tire out of his trunk. So, and even when Travolta, when he goes back into the office, the secretary to the movie studio is like, oh yeah, some guy was in here today, and she doesn't really get the finish because Jack's freaking out.
She's all, I don't really like your tone.
Yep, that was. Yep, Burke was in there erasing all the tapes, and that's why when Jack sends it to he gives it to the cops so that they can listen to the sound recording that he made, that he was in the park recording that night when the car accident happens. He gives it to the cop, and then the cop calls him back and was like, "Hey, man, there's nothing on this. It's totally blank. You're jerking me around."
It was smart of Jack to have made a duplicate because he puts it up in the ceiling tiles right beforehand.
Yes.
So he has a backup the entire time. So then he eventually is able to still sync up the sound to the film, because Sally ends up going to that to the photographer, and they have this little bout, and she steals the film from him and goes back to Jack.
Yeah, and you can tell if you watch the movie, if you're paying attention, in the park when the car goes off the bridge into the water and Jack dives in, you can see someone underneath the bridge like running up the hill.
Yeah, I noticed that immediately, and I was all, is that like he's supposed to be there?
That was Manny.
Yeah.
He was down there taking the pictures, and he sells the pictures he sells the film. He was shooting a movie. He sells the film to the newspaper, and they have like the frame by frame, like it's the Zapruder film, which I think he mentions. They have the frame by frame breakdown, which Jack cuts out of the paper and makes like a little flip book of it, and then takes individual photos of each frame and pieces those together to kind of make his own movie and sync it up with the sound recording that he has of the accident. And you can kind of see the little puff of smoke,
yes,
coming from the bushes. And then when Sally manages to get the actual film off of Manny, they watch it and he syncs it up, with the sound, and you can see like the actual muzzle flash of the gunshot. It's great, like just the obsessive way that Jack breaks that whole thing down. Not just like seeing the film, but like when he's in the hotel room the next morning after the accident, and you can see him, he's listening and he's holding the pencil like it's his mic. And he's moving it in each direction of where the sounds are coming from. Now the whole sequence is incredible, of him breaking it down, of listening to the recording, making the flip book, and then, making an actual film of the flip book. It's really good. Like, I love just how obsessive and like detail oriented his character is, and in turn, like the film is.
Do you think did Travolta have to study how the like Foley people work, or did he do any kind of research of his own to get that kind of performance? Because it feels like he's been doing that for a while.
Yeah,
it translates very well on film. So I'm curious, like, did he do any, like, did he sit in on while people were actually putting stuff together to try to get the feel of it?
I'm sure that he did, and also just being on the movie set, you see people doing that job, and you're able to observe them. I mean, I think De Palma actually came up with the idea for this while he was doing the sound mix on Dress to Kill. Just working with that, and adding in the sound effects and all that stuff in post, just kind of getting that idea to the movie. It's really cool. It's like a really fascinating look, like you said, of just kind of behind the scenes of a lot of different things that go into filmmaking.
Because when you see movies usually when it's like a movie within a movie, they focus on the bigger things like the director or the actors themselves, or maybe the screenwriter, but not like the sound engineering or the mixer or, Foley artist. So it's pretty cool. Yeah. It was cool in that aspect for sure.
And honestly, that's a fun job.
Oh, yes.
Is, doing sound recording or, doing Foley work. It's really fun. You were talking about the 360 shot when it's going around his office, and each time, like, Jack's pulled more shit off of the shelves and has listened to it, and like his whole office is trashed.
Yes.
In the end, there's like that overhead shot, which is super reminiscent of The Conversation, if you've ever seen that movie.
Gene Hackman. Right?
Yeah, Gene Hackman, like Francis Ford Coppola movie. And Gene Hackman is a sound technician in that movie as well. And another good conspiracy paranoia thriller from the 70s. And the very last shot of that is he thinks his apartment is bugged, so he's literally like ripping up his apartment looking for the bugging device. And the last shot of the movie is kind of like a higher angle above him as it's kind of like looking through his trashed apartment, and he's just sitting there. And that's very that shot of Travolta and of Jack sitting there in his office, trash with like all the tape and reels like strewn about all over the place. That's very reminiscent of that final shot in The Conversation. Let's talk more Burke.
Oh, yes.
There's that whole scene in the train station, like prior to him meeting up with Sally, where he's watching a prostitute, like kind of approach some sailors, trying to drum up business, and that's the scene we talked about previously, where he's playing with the watch.
Yeah,
with the garrote on his watch.
Super bonkers scene.
And then he follows them as one of the sailors goes into the phone booth to get some service from the prostitute. And while it's happening, the camera does this like really great pan across all the phone booths.
Mm-hmm.
And then you see in the last one, you see Burke like watching it. He's pretending like he's on the phone. He's watching it, and it pans back to the sailor. And then it pans like back to Burke. And it pans like back to the sailor who, comes quickly and early. And then the prostitute is complaining about that. And then as she kind of stands up, like you see Burke on the other end, like hold up money. Like he taps on the glass to get her attention.
50, yeah.
And then he's like holding up the cash.
And she signals him like, give me 5 minutes.
Yeah, but he does like this weird, almost like thumb sucking motion.
Yeah. And that interaction with the sailor is funny because he like finishes too quickly, and then he tries to blames the girl. He's like, well, you're only getting 10 or something.
No, man, that's not her problem. That's yours. Pay her the money.
And they're super obvious about what they're doing.
Yeah.
Like it's like rattling the whole all the boots. Oh, man. And then she's like, so she tells Burke like, okay, give me 5 minutes. And then she starts heading to the ladies' room. And I was all, oh, come on. She's not going to do it. And then, yep, she starts brushing her teeth before she goes to see Burke, I guess. But of course, she's unaware that he's followed her into the ladies' room and is in the next stall being very, very creepy.
Mm-hmm.
He's got his gloves on already, and he pretty much steps on the toilet so he can peer down over her, and she doesn't really notice it. She can feel somebody watching her, but she doesn't actually look up. And then so he kind of bides his time for a bit, and it's very, very tension building. He's got that, what do you call it, the piano wire ready, and then he strangles her basically in the stall, and we get that great shot of her feet kind of
dangling.
Yes, until she loses consciousness, and it's pretty iconic.
It's a great sequence. He's such a good villain. I can't say it enough. He's really good in the 3 movies that he makes with De Palma. He's very good in all of them. So check those out. I already talked about Raising Cain being like a pretty bonkers performance, but he's great in it, and he's in Obsession. He's very good in Obsession as well.
I know you weren't a fan of this movie, but he's Judd in the newer Pet Sematary as well.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a fan of him.
Yeah.
The movie wasn't great. Mary Lambert's movie's so much better.
Yeah, it is. He's got like 2 great villain roles in the 90s, and one is in Ricochet with Denzel, Mm-hmm.
and the other is Cliffhanger, which for years I could have sworn that he was British because he's got the British accent in Cliffhanger, and he's so fucking good in that movie. I always thought he was British. I had to keep looking up to see where exactly he was from.
That's right, he is in Cliffhanger.
Yeah, he's a really great villain in Cliffhanger. Before we get into like the kind of the last act, after Jack witnesses the car go into the river or the creek, and he jumps in. They're at the hospital, and there's that scene of him at the hospital, and he's talking to the cop, and it's so obvious from just the line of questioning that the cop wants to cover this up already.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's asking him, where were you? What happened? And, Jack's telling him about Sally, and you're like, are you sure, like, you weren't confused? Like, it's really dark underwater. And he's like, well, yeah, like, I know what I'm talking about. And he's like, oh, yeah, I don't think that there was a girl. I think you're just making that up. And it's so obvious that they want to cover this up. There's a great, like, De Palma was very good at using, like, the split diopter shot.
Oh, yes.
Which, for those who don't know, is where, like, you put it on the lens and it kind of splits the scene or the shot in 2, where it makes the foreground and the background, like, be in really sharp focus.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really cool effect. And a lot of the times what they would do was stitch the scene together, and you could kind of see the line running down the middle, but the diopter kind of erases that line, and you can't really tell where the seam is. But it's really cool, the effect that it is, that it makes. But there's that really cool diopter shot where he's in the hospital and he's standing there, and like the cop is talking to the detective's talking to like the governor's like friend or right hand guy, and they point at Jack, and then the guy comes to talk to Jack and says, hey, this could be very embarrassing for him, so forget that you saw the girl. She's not a part of this. From the jump, they're trying to cover all this up. They don't want it to be embarrassing to him. So Sally basically doesn't exist. There never was a girl in the car. There never was a girl that you pulled out of the creek. She doesn't exist. And then later on, when, it's obvious that there's a bigger conspiracy at play here, that's what, Jack is talking to Sally and is like, hey, they made you disappear. They erased my tapes. Pretty soon they'll make me disappear. But just that whole scene in the hospital is great, especially when the cop is trying to so obviously say that, she doesn't exist by making Travolta sound like he's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And then when he goes to visit her, and she's obviously loopy, either from shock or, they gave her something to calm her down. He's trying to put her back in the bed for her to get rest, and she's like, oh, we should go. We should do this. And then, the guy wants to question her, And even from that point, like, you could tell that Jack's very protective of her.
She ends up telling him later on when they meet up for he talks her into getting a drink with them, and she's all, they paid me off to skip town for a few months, and and he's like, well, what's the sense in going alone? I'll just skip town with you. You're like, let's do this.
And then later on, when when he wires her up and she goes to meet who she thinks is Donahue and is actually Burke. She before she meets up with Burke, she's talking to him and saying, "Hey, we should go out of town and we can go to New York and we can go and catch some shows." And she she really wants to run away with him, or have him go with her when she leaves. And it just makes the ending so much more tragic. But let's talk the last act before we get into some trivia shit.
All right.
I think that the direction in the last act is amazing. Starting with everything like in the train station. There's some great tension when Jack's listening to her on the wire. And he realizes that something's wrong. I think he realizes that it's not Donahue that she's talking to. And he goes and he runs into the station and he's looking for her. And he's trying to listen for the sounds of where is she? Where can I figure out where she is by listening to what's going on in the background? And, he hears like the turnstile of the subway, so he knows that she's somewhere in the subway, so he's headed in that direction. And that scene reminds me of the bigger train station stuff in Carlito's Way, in the last act of Carlito's Way, where Pacino's trying to get away from the guys. And as, Burke, walks Sally into the subway station, he's prepared to kill her down there. Just walk to the end of the platform. And he's following her closely, and you can tell that he's getting ready to choke her or to strangle her. And then the guy comes out to clean the graffiti.
Yeah.
Kind of spooks him. But then when the train finally comes in, Sally says, "Oh, we're going to the Parkway?" Something like that, and then Jack knows, that's where she is, so he heads out. That's when he gets in the Jeep and does that crazy driving right through the middle of the parade.
Yeah.
The way Burke is talking to her, it's like he almost wants to take her out on a date. That's the way it seems. He's like, "Oh yeah, we could go down here, we could watch the fireworks." He says, "Oh, we're being followed," in order to get her to, to go down the station someplace kind of remote where he can kill her. But then he's like, "Oh yeah, we could take the train down here, watch the parade, see the fireworks," which Sally should have known something was up at that point.
She doesn't know until they get to this kind of pier where Burke asks her to show him the film along with the the audio.
Yeah, the audio, which Jack had made copies of the audio tape because that was easy for him, but he couldn't make a copy of the movie film.
Yeah, so there was only that was like the one.
Yeah.
And Burke just right in front of her wraps it up and chucks it into the ocean.
Into the river, yeah. Should have known something was up.
And Sally goes, what'd you do that for?
Yeah, if I were Jack, I wouldn't have let that stuff out of my sight. Knowing how important it was, that the film especially proves the conspiracy. Proves that it was murder and not just a random tire blowout. But Jack wakes up in the ambulance, puts the earpiece back in and tries to figure out where she is. And just that whole sequence of him trying to figure out where she is and like running through the crowd. And in typical De Palma fashion, it's like the slow-mo as Burke is dragging Sally, you know, trying to drag her to some place where he can murder her in, for lack of a better phrase, in peace. And as he's dragging her up the stairs, you know, Jack's looking for her. And it isn't until they're on the roof and she kind of fights off Burke and runs to the ledge and lets out that scream, which is a great shot, like with the flag behind her.
Yes.
The giant, like, American flag backdrop. And she lets out that really terrified scream. And Jack sees her and runs up. But by the time he gets there, he sees Burke, like, readying to stab her. And he comes up behind Burke, grabs his arm, and ends up stabbing Burke with the ice pick. Makes him, like, stab himself, like, multiple times.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, you know, by then it's too late. You know, he sees Sally's body. He sees the ligature mark and the red blood on her neck from the strangulation. And it's so heartbreaking because he again, as we've said, like, he just wanted to protect her, but he's the one that puts her in harm's way. And it goes bad, and she ends up getting killed because of what he did.
And there's that great shot where he's holding her body, and then simultaneously these fireworks are going off behind her.
Oh yeah, that's a great green screen shot. You can just see all the fireworks, and then, like, the camera's kind of doing like the slow pan around them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's so good. And, like, the DiNaggio score is like really heartbreaking over that scene.
So I know I've heard that piece of music somewhere else, and I'm gonna ask you. And I know you hate this movie, but I'm pretty sure Tarantino used it in Death Proof. Am I right?
He does, yes.
Okay,
he does. But we didn't talk about the screams early on in the movie, which are fucking hilarious. The scream at the very beginning, you know, when it's like the slasher movie, and
yes.
You don't know that you're watching the movie within the movie at first.
Yes.
The scream is so awful that even the guy, like the director's like, "What?" And Travolta's like, "That's the guy. That's the actress that you set us up with. That's her scream." And then later on, when he's in the office, and he's trying to get his stuff, and the director pulls him in, and there's the three women sitting on the couch.
Yes.
And he's like, "Oh, really quick, you need to listen." And he like points to each one, and they all let out this terrible scream.
He's like, "What do you think?" Keep looking.
Keep looking. And then later on, there's like the two girls in the recording booth,
pulling each other's hair.
Yeah, pulling each other's hair. It's so bad. You've never heard worse screams in your life.
And the director's like, he gets on the intercom. He's like, "Shut up!" He looks at Jack and he goes, "I'm sorry. Don't you work for me? Like, what the fuck are you doing?" Because Jack, for a while, he just stops paying attention to his job at all, where he's just completely
he's like
hyper focused on busting this case.
He's so wrapped up in the conspiracy that he just like forgets his day job completely, and the director's like getting more and more agitated with him, which adds like a little comic undertone to the movie.
Yes.
But after Sally's death, there's that shot of Jack sitting on the bench outside listening to that tape of that day where she's talking to him about running away to New York and how they should go and do this and do that, and just that guilt he has is very palpable. And then the last scene of the movie is disturbing. It's heartbreaking and disturbing at the same time, because you see the the slasher film, and you see the girl in the shower being menaced with the knife, and she lets out this scream that's awful, like in the real way, just so terrified, and you realize that it's Sally's scream. When she screamed for Jack just before Burke murders her. And the director is, oh, yeah, that's such a good, that's so good. That's such a great scream. But Jack is just so traumatized by it.
Yeah, he's all sweaty and just covering his ears.
Yeah, he's like, oh, it's, the director's like, oh, it's great, man. That's one of the best screams ever. And Jack's just like, yeah, it's a good scream, and he repeats that a couple of times, and then the director plays it again, and Jack just, closes his eyes and puts his fingers in his ears. It's so hard for him to listen to, but also he knows that it's a good scream. I say it's disturbing, but like after I had seen this movie when I was in high school, my friend Anthony used to repeat that final line like all the time. He's just like, he would mimic like the cigarette, and he'd just be like, it's a good scream. It's a good scream. But it's, man, like I said, that whole last act, that final sequence through the parade, and even in the train station prior to that, is so goddamn good. And just to have such a fucking tragic ending with Sally getting murdered and Jack failing to protect her, being the one that puts her in harm's way. And just the guilt that he feels, like you said, the guilt that he had over getting the undercover cop killed, and the guilt that he now has to live with of getting Sally killed, when he obviously was trying to protect her. And
it also, for me at least, in that ending, it seems like they covered up what actually happened. They don't reveal, like in the news broadcast we hear, they don't reveal who the killer ended up being.
Yeah, they say, they reveal that, or they don't reveal, they claim that, his third victim, Sally, managed to, kill him in the process of getting killed herself.
And they don't.
Forensic could have easily told you, yeah, that's not how that went down. But, they're covering it all up because they want to cover up the conspiracy.
So with Jack basically continuing to stay quiet and then using Sally's screams for his own benefit, it's almost like, to me, he's become complacent and fallen in line with, okay, I give up, pretty much.
Well, he can't prove the conspiracy anymore because the film, the actual movie, got destroyed. Yes. That was the only copy he had, and he knows that unless I have this along with the audio recording of the accident, no one is going to believe me. No one believes me now. But if I don't have the film, they're definitely not going to believe me, because the film shows the actual muzzle flash that, yes, the tire was shot out. It wasn't just a random tire blowing out.
He should have gave Sally the dummy, like a dummy reel and fake audio, and then seen if it was legit, and then been like, okay, if it really was the reporter, then have him meet up with Jack later, But
yeah, he's like we've mentioned, he's kind of so hell-bent on proving the conspiracy that he starts not thinking about things that he should, and not playing it safer. And him not playing it safer is unfortunately what ultimately gets Sally killed. But man, what a good movie.
It's like you always say, not every movie has to have a happy ending. No,
sometimes they have to end on a downer, or have a sad ending. Shit happens in real life. Not everything always has a happy ending in real life, and sometimes a movie needs to end, showing you, not everyone does live happily ever after. But it's just such a gut-wrenching ending. with her getting killed and all, but also like the scream. So here's some trivia. Here's some notes for you. Do you know that this is De Palma's favorite DiMaggio score?
I didn't.
That he thinks that this is the best score for his film, or the best DiMaggio score in any of his movies. Speaking of DiMaggio, I told you they scored a bunch of the Palma movies.
Yes.
He does Body Double, which is a few years after this. He does Raising Cain. He did two latter day De Palma movies, one of which I've seen, and it's awful. It's Domino.
Oh, yeah.
For your listeners, we're not talking the Tony Scott movie with Keira Knightley and Mickey Rourke. It's some shitty movie that came out a few years ago that apparently De Palma has disavowed as well because the studio fucked it up. But I remember I watched that last year sometime, I think, and it's terrible. He did the original score for Snake Eyes, but that score got rejected and he got replaced. But his score for Dress to Kill is awesome. Here's a funny bit of trivia for you. 2 reels of footage from the Liberty Day parade sequence in the climax were stolen from a van while the driver had stopped to get donuts.
I did read that. And they were never recovered.
Never recovered. He was going to the airport, I guess, to ship the film out. They shot in Philadelphia, which is De Palma's hometown, but I think they were shipping them out to Los Angeles. Shipping the film out to Los Angeles to get processed. And guy stops to get donuts, leaves the van unattended, gets broken into, and 2 of these reels get stolen. So never recovered. Insurance covers it. They have to reshoot the film. At least what they lost.
It was something like $750,000.
$750,000, yeah.
That's wild, man. I'd really like to know, like, do those 2 original reels exist somewhere? Does somebody have them?
Someone has them. If they've kept them in decent condition, they're still watchable. The film hasn't deteriorated, but it all depends on where they left them. But wow, I wonder if that guy got fired. I think this was the first time De Palma used Steadicam too.
He uses that for the B horror movie, right?
He uses it there. He uses it when Burke's tracking that first girl, like through the fish market and then to the bus stop.
That's right.
I think the Steadicam kind of came about like in the early, like late 70s, early 80s, because I think Kubrick was the first one to use it for The Shining. For those shots of like Jack walking around the hotel and of Danny riding the tricycle.
Yes. And then Carpenter uses Steadicam for that the opening shot of the original 78 Halloween, right? Is that the same?
Yeah, when Michael goes to and murders his sister, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that was a relatively new invention in the late 70s and early 80s. Do you know that at one point, like, Manny's in his like flop house hotel because he's hiding out.
Mm-hmm.
He's watching a movie on TV. You know, that's like one of De Palma's first movies.
Yes. Called
Murder a la Mode. It's actually on the Criterion Blu-ray of Blowout, which I guess I should sit down and watch it.
Oh, really? The whole movie is on there?
Yeah, the whole movie's on it.
Wow.
So those are just some random bits of trivia that I had come across that I thought might be interesting. We've talked about everything else, trivia-wise at least. Really quick, speaking of Dennis Franz, who's great in this, he's Manny. I told you he was great in Dress to Kill.
Yes.
He's in Body Double. He's in The Fury. He has a cameo in Scarface, but he's uncredited in Scarface. His cameo is in the very, very opening of the film when you hear the people questioning Tony. Dennis Franz is the voice of the guy questioning Tony in the very beginning of the movie. But when they actually cut to the scene and you see the guy in the room with them, it's not Dennis Franz.
Yeah, it's somebody else, right?
Yeah. But Dennis Franz is the voice in the very beginning, like asking Tony all the questions. It's like, "Hey, ¿cómo se llama?"
Yeah.
He's like, "Where'd you get that scar?"
When Tony is like, "What the fuck is the matter with this guy, man?" Amazing.
Like I said, I'm a huge Dennis Franz guy because I used to love NYPD Blue when that was on TV, and like I don't know how many movies he did overall, but he's in like those De Palma movies, those earlier De Palma movies, like from the 70s and 80s, and he's so awesome in him. I love him, but I always like that. That's a really fun cameo in that movie. In fact, he's pretty sleazy in all those De Palma movies because he's sleazy in Body Double too. He's the director of the. You've seen Body Double, right?
Yes.
He's the director of the movie, the vampire movie that they're making at the very beginning and then again at the very end. So here we go. Movie opens up July 1981. A weird time to open a movie like this, in my opinion, is summertime. I think that would have played better in the fall. But movie, things release schedules and everything were different. So maybe that's why they tried to release it in the summer, but I think it plays better as a fall movie. It opens up in a summer that's really fucking stacked with a lot of hits. Raiders of the Lost Ark, Cannonball Run, Stripes, Superman 2, For Your Eyes Only, Escape from New York. Those all open up that summer, and all of them are huge hits. So, I mean, Blowout never had a chance. Especially because, the downer ending, it's a lower budget film. It's definitely an adult-oriented film. By the way, Raiders of the Lost Ark is the highest-grossing movie of that year. And the highest-grossing movie of the year, 1981, made $212 million. So that should tell you how much tickets cost back in 1981. Nowadays, that's like a good opening weekend for a movie.
Yeah.
But, it's unfortunate it kind of gets lost in the shuffle of that summer. By the way, we've kind of talked about this movie before because the production company for it, the studio, was Filmways Pictures. And we talked about Filmways when we talked about Blade Runner because Filmways had committed, what was the number? 13 mil, I think, to Blade Runner. And then they drop out of financing, or at least financing that chunk of money in Blade Runner to finance Blowout.
I mean, both those movies pretty much bombed, so they would have been doomed either way, right?
Probably, yeah. They would have lost money on either. But like we said, the film, it gets positive reviews when it comes out. Pauline Kael, who we always bring up, who was notorious for being like real picky. She loved the movie. She gave it like a rave review. And I have her quote in it here. I'll read you the quote in a minute. By the way, she hates Raiders of the Lost Ark. Which, we talked about was out that same summer, but she hated Raiders of the Lost Ark. Loves this movie. This is what she writes. She wrote, De Palma has sprung to the place that Robert Altman achieved with his films such as McCabe and Mrs. Miller and Nashville, and that Francis Ford Coppola reached with the Godfather films. That is, to the place where genre is transcended and what we're moved by is an artist's vision. It's a great movie. Travolta and Allen are radiant performers. So high praise from someone who was always real picky when it came to movies. But as much as you want to knock her, she was a great film critic and a good writer. There's a good documentary on her that I watched not too long ago, and I forget the name of it right now. But our buddy Roger Ebert gives the film 4 stars. The film is inhabited by a real cinematic intelligence. The audience isn't condescended to. We share the excitement of figuring things out how things develop and unfold, when so often the movies only need us as passive witnesses.
I believe Siskel and Ebert both love this.
Oh, that's good. They didn't argue.
No, I think they gave it perfect review.
I'd have to go back and listen to our Strange Days episode. Off topic here, but I meant to tell you that because you can go and watch a lot of those episodes on YouTube.
Yes.
I went back. I happened to be doing a kind of a dive on Strange Days a few weeks ago again, and I came across the Siskel and Ebert show where they talked about it. And Siskel didn't like it, and Ebert was like, "What are you talking about? This is one of the best movies of the year." And, for this reason, and this reason, and this reason. I was pretty excited that at least Ebert liked it. So, as you mentioned, the film only grosses about $13.7 million. So it's, minus, $5-6 million from its budget. And here's a crazy number for you. Filmways aimed high with their aspirations. They claimed it would make $60 to $80 million in 1981. There's no way that this movie, being a small thriller aimed at adults, would make that kind of money in 1981. No fucking way.
What would be your projected amount if they had released it in the fall?
Maybe 30.
Okay.
35. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to tell, and especially back then because, like I said, the highest grossing movie of the year made $212 million. The highest grossing movies of the years, a couple years prior were adult dramas. Now the highest grossing in the movie of the year is always a fucking comic book movie because that's just the way things go.
Yeah, and they'll make $250 fucking million in opening weekend.
Yeah. Yeah, so for these guys in 1981 to think that a movie like this was going to make $80 million, that's insane. Those guys were crazy. I don't know if I read that on IMDb or if I read that on the Wikipedia page for it, but I was like, you have to be kidding me.
I wonder if they were just really, really banking on the John Travolta brand.
Maybe they were banking on De Palma coming off of Dress to Kill, which, if I'm not mistaken, was a pretty solid hit. Okay, so Dress to Kill, with a budget of $6 million in 1980, made $31.9 million. It's released literally a year before Blowout. Exactly a year.
I wonder why Dress to Kill was such a hit and being made for only $6 million, and then you get, this great cast and Blowout with a bigger budget, especially for De Palma, and then it just doesn't pan out for them.
Yeah, it's a bummer.
Because I think they spent, supposedly from what I read, and I could be mistaken, but they spent $8 million just for marketing Blowout, so it wasn't that people didn't know about it.
Yeah, the $18 million budget was the original $9 million that De Palma had secured, and then another $9 million to market it. So yeah, they were plastering this thing everywhere. If they spent that much money to market it.
Yeah, that's wild.
Over the years, it's kind of got that kind of reevaluation. I don't want to say reevaluation because it got positive reviews to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
It just didn't do well at the box office, but its reputation grew considerably because Quentin Tarantino is a huge, huge fan of the movie. Always sings its praises. I think Nancy Allen credits him with the film kind of coming around again and getting like a second chance. And according to Tarantino, he says it's like one of his 3 favorite movies. Whether this is true or not, the reason that Travolta gets cast in Pulp Fiction is because Tarantino's love for this movie.
Should have fucking better known better.
I'm sure I've told you before. My dad loved I'm a mushroom cloud man, motherfucker. Didn't care for the movie overall, but loved that line. Speaking of Tarantino, I listened to the Video Archives episode. They talk about Dress to Kill a couple weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I listened to that episode, and man, if you haven't listened to it, listen to it, and then go and watch the movie. Because him and Roger, and they had Eli Roth on, all love this movie and talk like so lovingly about it, and everything that what's so great about the movie and how well it works, and how amazing the direction is, and how De Palma shoots lots of scenes in that movie. The murder in the elevator is incredible, the way that it's shot. So I highly recommend checking out the podcast, period, but especially that episode where they talk about Dress to Kill. All I can say is, check this movie out if you haven't seen it. I'm super excited that I was able to introduce it to you, and that you enjoyed it, and that you rank it pretty fucking high in his filmography.
Yes.
So that means a lot to me. This has always been, as I said early on in the show, I've been a huge De Palma fan for a long time, and this was one that I saw that is right up there with some of his best movies. So I'm excited. I would highly recommend it to anyone who hasn't seen it. As you said, it's a great kind of 70s style paranoia movie, even though it's from the early 80s. But if you watched it with the Parallax View or 3 Days of the Condor or the remake of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, it would fit right in.
Definitely. And there's no excuses because it's readily available right now on HBO Max. So if you're listening to this somehow and you haven't seen the movie, please go watch it. Because
watch it.
It's worth it. So fucking good.
And if you like it, pick up the Criterion Blu-ray of it.
Yes, which that artwork rolls too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good disc, and now I kind of want to go back and watch that movie that was his first movie that he references in this.
Also, next week, Ryan's going to come back, and I'm going to pick kind of something random, and it doesn't really have to do with the holidays, but I want to talk about The Foreigner.
Oh, and Jackie Chan?
Yes, and Pierce
Good
Brosnan.
movie. It's a good, solid, B action movie.
Yes.
And Jackie Chan is fantastic in it. I think he does some of the best acting he's ever done.
Yeah, it feels very much like when Jet Li was like, yo, I want to be taken more seriously. And he did, what the fuck is it called? Unleashed, I think?
Uh-huh.
And his whole thing with Unleashed was I want to have more screen time as an actor as opposed to just being known for my choreography. And I feel like The Foreigner is very much Jackie Chan doing that, and he fucking passed with flying colors.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really good movie. So ask me what we got coming up next.
That's right. What are we doing for the end of December, my man?
Well, we always do 2 shows at the end of the year. Excuse me. The first is going to be our Christmas episode, which is a comedy. I don't want to say an anthology because it all takes place with the same characters all in the universe, but kind of like some separate stories. But a good Christmas movie, kind of an unconventional Christmas movie. We're taking it back this year. One that's, at one point, I was a little hesitant if we were going to do it because of something that came up earlier. But we're going to keep it. We're going to keep with the original plan, and we're going to do this movie for Christmas. I'm excited. I haven't watched it in a few years. So I'm excited to see it, and it's got a lot of really great performances by some people that were kind of starting out at the time. And then, of course, at New Year's, we're going to do our best of. And I can't wait for that. And I still have some homework to do because there's still some big movies that I haven't watched this year yet that I need to watch so that we can discuss them.
Everybody out there, check out Blowout. This was a lot of fun, Chris.
I hope we did the movie justice by talking about it. I hope it's a good episode, as always.
The very first film of De Palma's that we've done on this show.
Yeah, I'm shocked that you and I haven't covered De Palma yet. And all the time that I've been making appearances on your show. And an early spoiler might be that we cover him again next year.
This has been Chris Pawlak and Wesley Swanson. Until next time, we'll say good fight and good night.
But wait a minute. Come on, Jake. Look, how many years we worked together?
Let's see. I met you on Bloodbath, right?
Yeah.
And then we did Bloodbath 2. And then we did Bad Day at Blood Beach. And then we did Bordello of Blood. And then, well, that brings us up to date. Co-ed Frenzy. By the way, I didn't tell you this, but I'd like to think this is our finest film.
Almost 2 years.
Oh, God, 2 years. 5 films in 2 years. How do we do it?
You know what I can't figure out? I can't figure out what a smart guy like you is still doing that shit for.
Oh, come on. You do this shit. I do the sound.
Oh, no, you do the shit.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, like that wind in the trees. It sounds like you're whistling in the crap.
That's the library stuff. We used it 1,000,000 times.
That is the trouble. I have heard it 1,000,000 times. Now get something new.
New wind.
Yeah.
Got it.
And what about that scream? We gotta dub that.
All right. You know any good screamers?
I got a few ideas.
Yeah, I bet you do.
Yeah. Just worry about the scream, will you, huh?